but as a backstop.
Did they realize this after Friday?
Yeah.
Or had they known this before?
Well, Friday.
Yeah.
Friday was just a culmination when they came together and they were like, okay,
Actually,
by
this
the
is
way,
true.
no, we should do something about it. Probably. Maybe that's what they did. Let's talk to somebody who understands these matters of political parties in the country. A number of things that he understands. The history of politics in this country. Okay, he's a man who, the last time we spoke to him, was telling us about how much of depth of wisdom that he has on these matters because he has participated in many. He is the Secretary General of the Amani National Congress. He is also a publisher and he is a commentator on matters politics in the country. Barrack Muluka, good morning.
Morning, Eric. How are you?
Salama kabisa. Happy Madaraka Day to you.
Happy Madaraka. I'm happy to talk to you and to witness the 57th Madaraka.
Good morning, Barrack.
Hey, morning, Undi. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good to talk to you.
Same here. Happy Madaraka Day.
Happy Madaraka.
Now, Barrack, are you in Nairobi? Are you in the village?
I'm taking it easy right here in Westlands. Matata, as we say.
Right.
That's a good one. Yesterday, well, the past week, this weekend, we have seen something happen.
Yes.
And this is the clamor for Luhya unity.
Yes.
This was being led by Francis Atwoli, who hosted a number of leaders from Western Kenya. They met at his home in Isinya, and they discussed Luhya unity. And then soon after, we start seeing what happened unravel at Fort Kenya yesterday.
Yes.
And then your own party leader issued a statement as well and said that meeting must have discussed how to destabilize independent-minded political parties.
Yes.
Give us a perspective on this. What's happening?
First of all, I think I have to frame it within a thematic prism. And I would say that what we are witnessing as a country overall is a process of reversals and negations. Reversals of democratic gains that have been made history, and we are seeing very deliberate negations from very high places. It is not as if this has not happened before in the country. It is something that has previously happened. So if I leave aside the Luhya unity bit first, because I can always go back to that and address it, and address more fundamental national issues and agenda. We saw that in the period 1963 to 1964-65, there was a derogation of democracy and the paralyzation of democratic institutions and processes in the country under the Jomo Kenyatta government, and which was spearheaded by Tom Mboya, Charles Njonjo, Mike Baki, and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, although Odinga himself would also go on to become a victim of the same process. But they went for opposition parties. Then they went for the Senate. They went for the regional assemblies. They killed them. After doing that, they turned inside in Kanu and repressed dissent. Then they killed Parliament. And when a member of Parliament stood up on the floor of the House and said they want to kill Parliament the way Kanu was killed, he was asked to substantiate. And when the Deputy Speaker said, "How can you substantiate the obvious?" both of them were detained. Now that process is playing itself again. We have got a parliament that is whipped from State House. Not even at the lowest moment of the Kanu regime that I speak about did Presidents Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi whip parliament from State House. It is a show of might. If I have an issue with you and I come to meet you to discuss it, and I'm displaying guns from my hipsters,
Yep.
it is an act of intimidation.
Yep.
And that intimidation has led to the capture of the legislature, such that you have legislators who stand to speak on the floor of the House. They speak for about 5-10 minutes, and then they go on to vote in a manner that is contrary
To how
the
they
things
spoke.
that they have just been thinking and articulating on the floor.
Yeah.
It is an indication that you are talking about people who are afraid. They're afraid of State House, of the wielders of power. And these things must be called by their correct names. Parliament is now hostage, it is captive, and institutions are being infiltrated.
But
The
Barrack,
National Assembly, yes.
did this happen progressively or was it just sudden?
It has been happening progressively. There's been the purge in Jubilee Party, and people will tell us things like, oh, don't talk about it. You are not in Jubilee. It does not concern you. All these things concern us. Martin Nemler said in 1946 that first they came for the socialists,
Yep.
and I did not speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unions, and I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics, and I did not speak up because I was a Protestant.
Yep.
Then they came for me, and there was nobody to speak.
Yep.
So these things concern us. So in Kiswahili, they say when you see somebody being shaved, please start preparing your
Prepare
head.
your head.
It's coming next. And now this is what has been happening, and I think that without fear of contradiction, this regime, particularly its second phase, is going to go down in history as a regime that presided on reversals and negations of the gains that the previous regimes and leaders had been forced to allow. And when you see what is happening in Kajiado, where the Secretary General of the organization, Central Organization of Trade Unions, is leading a so-called tribal caucus, first from a tribal platform, it is flawed. You cannot canvass Luhya matters in Isinya, in Kajiado. You have to go and canvass them in Kakamega, in Busia, in Bungoma, in Trans Nzoia.
Okay.
You cannot install Luhya elders and spokespersons in the absence of the aged grandees of the community who have got the paraphernalia for those kinds of installations. You cannot do it using borrowed mouth, because strictly when you start talking about Luhya, who is a Luhya, then we are talking about people's ancestries and genetic makeups. Eugene Wamalwa is not a Luhya. Eugene Wamalwa is a Sabaot, Mount Elgon, Maasai.
Yep.
And sometimes the Luhya people behave as if being Luhya is a movement. That anyone who wants to join in is
Can
allowed
just come
to
along.
join in.
Anyone can be a
they can
Luhya.
just,
But
anyone
Barrack,
can be a Luhya.
Atwoli has
Yeah.
a rebuttal on that. And he says, look, in 2016, I held a meeting in this same home where we started the conversation of having Musalia Mudavadi to be installed as a Luhya leader. Culminated
we did
in
not know.
December 31st at Buhungu Stadium, where now we had an entire meeting, and he said, look, our spokesman as the Luhya community is Musalia Mudavadi. And at that point, none of you made
Yes.
any noise.
Well, we did not know, at least I did not know that it was a choreography that began in Isinya. If indeed it was, and that's what he's saying, I'm being educated now and by yourselves and by him. But we know that he said that he had gone through a process
Yeah.
that
He even brought in a
was-
survey. He conducted a survey, I remember, in 2016.
Eric, I'm the guest. on this show.
Mm.
So you don't ask questions and answer them yourself. You ask questions and you allow the guest to answer.
I'm reminding you. I'm reminding you of that process. Some of those things were really public. If you are not aware of a meeting at home, you must be aware.
Why don't you allow me to answer the question you have asked, Eric?
Go ahead.
Yeah, because the meetings, and I must confess, I attended at least one of them, were being held at a place called Ebuchero Ebukwala.
Mm-hmm.
And Ebuchero Ebukwala is in Kisa Central, in Muluanda sublocation, of Kisa Central location. That's where I know that Atoli held those meetings. And I was invited to one of those meetings. I was witness to them. But even as all this was happening, one of the biggest mistakes is when you attempt to be very humble and accommodative to people.
Yeah.
Number one, it should actually never have been done because Musalia Mudavadi had already in the year 2006 in Mudiro Gardens by Luhya elders been made an elder and a spokesperson of the community. So anything that Atwoli was doing was icing on the cake. It was like some of those weddings that I see people calling renewal of marriage.
Vows.
Of vows of marriage. Yeah? And which is really neither here nor there. But I was telling you about the movement, and which is important that we get this right, because I say that to be Luhya or to be Luo or to be anything else, you must have the genetic makeup. That when we do your genetic mapping, we can actually map you to some grand progenitors who no longer exist.
Yeah.
The genetic makeup of Eugene Wamalwa is Elgon Maasai. The genetic makeup of Wycliffe Oparanya is Teso. And the genetic makeup of Atwoli, in spite of even the disguise of the name Aduol, is Luo. So sometimes we completely get it wrong. It cannot even be done in the house of and the women will have to forgive me, but we are talking about culture. It cannot be done in the home of a junior wife in some foreign place called Maasai land. It can't. And then when you have also given the insignia and the regalia and the royal amulets, you cannot install someone else. We know, Eric, the whole of that panel that you have there has got people who are deeply healed in history. That you had kingdoms in the Great Lakes region, the Interlacustrine region, and that people would fight to try and get hold of the royal spears, the royal drums, the royal amulets. You cannot claim to sit on a royal stool when there is none, because it has already been taken. And that tradition goes all the way into the Bible. That Esau comes back and asks his father for blessings, and he's told that they're already gone. He's asked, can you give me even just a quarter of a blessing? There's none left.
Blessing, right.
And they say, well, they have gone. So they have gone.
I hear you
They've
talking.
gone, Eric.
Barrack, I hear you talking about precedent, essentially when all of these now traditions would take place. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago. When you said that such meetings, which seems to encapsulate people's imagination right now, you know, that's front and center, the drama, the theatrics of all of it, a meeting in a junior wife's house, as you've said. But you said it negates the gains that we have made along this. And I think it's interesting that we speak about this on Madaraka Day itself. And for people to be able to see the deeper and wider picture of all of this, then what, and at the risk of asking a naive question, what are these gains that would be negated by such action that we've seen over the last 3 days?
The gains that are hugely negated, the gains of in the area of the challenge of nationhood. Because Madaraka, as we speak of it today, Madaraka is the beginning of the birth of the Kenyan nation. And
Yep.
the Kenyan nation may not be surmised as a physical space, the expression of a geographical nature, where we map it in terms of certain coordinates and say that it runs from degrees this south to degrees that north and east and
Yeah.
west.
Yeah.
The Kenyan nation are a people, but there are people who have failed to amalgamate, to fuse and diffuse into each other and become one person. That was the essence of Madaraka. But then those people give themselves the opportunity for self-determination, the determination of their affairs relative to the resources that are available, relative to law and order, relative to the opportunities within that environment, and relative to equity, and relative to all those very edified aspirations that are captured in the national anthem, a God-fearing nation that lives in peace and liberty, that has got justice as its shield and defender, that enjoys the fruits of its labor, not the fruits of corruption.
Yep.
All those things are negated by the kind of negative ethnicity and chronisms that we start seeing in the capture of the legislature, in the attempt to capture the judiciary, in the invasion of political parties and disorganizing them for purposes of prosecuting the agenda of a few selfish individuals who hold the positions of power. President Uhuru Kenyatta, the most critical moment for President Uhuru Kenyatta is his tenure.
Yep.
The moment that he is in office,
Yep.
that is the moment he should be worried about.
Yep.
Instead of paying concern to the challenges that are encompassed in the time that he's sitting in the seat of power, he is spending time worrying about the next tenure and who will be and who will not be the next president. What does that matter to him? He should be worried about today the tenure that Kenyans have given him. People like Musalia Mudavadi and myself are the ones who should be worried about both the current tenure, because we have the
and the
responsibility to prefecture him,
Yep.
and the future, because we are competing for that space. For him, he should just be concerned with the present moment and the future only to the extent that he will hand over a stable country.
But now looking at all these things, and I think you've done very well to give us the context of this and taking us back to similar kind of events happening soon after independence. So we are at a place where, Barrack, you're saying you are feeling that there is, let's just call it state capture of the political scene in the country, where political
Yes.
parties are now being whipped from State House, where Parliament is being whipped and being directed from State House. What is the
Yes.
what's the way to salvage this situation, to take us back to the path of attaining proper democracy?
Informed, eternal vigilance. But moments such as these are the sorts of occasions that lead to only one person being left standing, a Dr. Stockman in Henrik Ibsen's An Enemy of the People. That it is such moments that leave only one John Proctor in Arthur Miller's The Crucible standing. That it is in such moments that you only have Thomas More standing in A Man for All Seasons.
Yep.
That the majority who are driven by appetitive concerns will surrender. That Parliament surrenders. One of the easiest things to do is to cave in to the dictates of power
For
and
sure.
the appetite. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you must have a few people who remain vigilant. People like myself, for example, 60 years and above, it doesn't matter if I drop dead tomorrow.
Oh, come on, Barrack.
It will not make such much difference, apart from the fact that the country will be the worse for it, because it loses one of...
I knew you were heading somewhere.
sober and bolder voices that Barrack, I
So-
really lose nothing.
Look, so Barrack Muluka would stand up. And then who else?
Yes.
Because I also have to raise the issue of, yes, we may have some people standing, but some of them are standing not because of the ideals that they believe in, but because they were not consulted or they were not brought in. How do we distinguish between those who stand smarting because they were not included and those who actually stand on principle?
If something is good, Eric, as Barrack, I will support it, regardless of where it was developed. If it is good, I'll be more concerned about the end rather than the means and the how of it. Although processes and means have been put there because they matter. When we ignore processes, then we start smuggling in wrong ends, and we start getting things wrong. That's why the process has been put there.
Yeah.
Critically, there's a very important institution. It was Oliver Cromwell, 1848, who referred to the media as the fourth estate when he said in Parliament, and yonder there in the gallery sits the fourth estate, and they are stronger than all the rest. The fourth estate is a gatekeeping institution.
Yep.
It is a watchdog institution. Its role is not just to inform us or to entertain us, as I've sometimes heard people say. Its role is to inform us. Its role is to editorialize. Its role is to set agenda. And the agenda setting role is particularly critical, that the fourth estate must get to the depth and substance of issues and place them squarely in the agora of public conversations, so that the citizens of this country can know where they are going. Sometimes you get the reportage looking like it's from a certain chamber of entertainment. And today there's such a notion as infotainment.
Right.
And the information is useful to the extent that it's entertaining us. We must remind ourselves that we are not talking about a football derby between Manchester United and Arsenal. We are talking about things that concern us.
Right.
Flesh
Whatever
and
direction
blood
it works.
things
True.
that have a direct bearing on us, and that the media cannot behave as if it's in some ivory tower watching those fools in the political theater messing themselves up in mud, that we are talking about things that are touching on you today. Look at a situation where 4 million, now I'm told 5 million jobs are at risk.
Yep.
And what we are seeing is Parliament convening not to discuss the potential loss of 5 million jobs, but the removal of a deputy speaker.
Yep.
For realignment, yeah.
We
Yep.
are not seeing people meeting to discuss the diminishing tax base, even as our expectations of the performance of government continue to rise. The tax base where this government derives
It's
the
revenues.
funds for its functions, its revenues, is diminishing, if not dying.
Yep.
Parliament is convened not to discuss that, but to talk about a deputy speaker, a minority whip, a majority whip
Yep.
who must be removed.
Yep.
Parliament meets not to talk about 196,000 citizens who have become homeless because of floods. or 9,000 families that the government has rendered homeless, but instead to talk about who should sit on what stool, cry the beloved country.
Well, Barrack, we see your party leader, Musalia Mudavadi of the ANC, has been very vocal on this, and like yesterday, issuing a statement as soon as the drama started unfolding in Fort Kenya, and calling out on the kind of shenanigans that are going on. Now, bringing you back to those that stand up and start speaking this alternative voice and bringing out the issues. This is exactly what's happening, and this is what we should be discussing as a country. Are we likely to see ANC now coming up and, let's say, working with Wetangula's wing of Fort Kenya and working with others to make that voice strong and loud?
We will make that voice strong and loud, and we will work with anybody and everybody whose vision is the same as our vision, who start seeing the need to place the country first. There's nobody on the landscape who turns the right direction, the right corner, that we will not, as ANC, talk to. Even those who persecute us today, Jesus Christ tells us about Saul of Tarsus on his way to Damascus to persecute Christians. And he saw the light, and there was a voice that said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Even those who persecute us today, if they turn the corner and they demonstrate that they have turned the corner, you must be willing to work with them. So there's nobody. Nobody.
That's a pointed statement. So let me just ask you directly. So are you saying that even the Tanga wing of Jubilee that has now been pushed and they're seeing things from a different light, ANC is willing to work with them?
If William Ruto will become Paul, he will work with Peter. Yeah? And you can go and read the scriptures and see how Saul of Tarsus became Paul. And he worked with Peter and the disciples.
People who he threatened to actually extinguish previously.
Absolutely. Nothing stops us. Yes.
Don't you feel that your agenda may not be the same? Your agenda may be well-intended. His agenda may be looking at just trying to get back. It's vengeful.
If our agenda will not be the same, and to use the same analogy that I've just used, we will have the Council of Jerusalem, and we will define a common agenda for the country.
I have to come back to this issue, Barrack, and I think that initially when political parties are formed, ideology is the foundation upon which they are built. And I have trouble many times finding the ideology practiced by many parties in this country. And unfortunately, I find personality politics playing out to a very large extent. What we see over the last couple of weeks is individuals aligning themselves towards the powers that be. And you alluded to that when we started this conversation, that individuals are going to take a particular position because they're either afraid of being left out, or rather afraid of being punished, at the same time afraid of being left out from the inner caucuses of power.
Yes.
So, why is it that we can't see the ideologies playing out? Because again, in the last statement that you've made, you've talked about for the betterment of the country. Now, why do we see the personality politics oftentimes outplaying the foundational ideologies of parties?
Well, first, the country itself is intolerant to ideology because a political economy thrives within certain philosophical orientations that we then call an ideology, an ideological orientation. What kind of country do you want to contribute towards, to build? What sort of nation, what sort of opportunities and means of accessing those opportunities do you want to put together for the betterment of the country? And that is not allowed in this country. So that as we went to independence, for example, there were clear ideological stance. You had the federalist orientation within KADU, and you had the centrist Unitarian, rather Unitarian nationalist orientation of KANU. Afterwards, you had the leftist socialist leanings of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and the quasi-capitalist agenda of Jomo Kenyatta and Tom Mboya, complete with certain levels of primitive accumulation. And in subsequent years, the ideology has been the ideology of the tribal dominance. And President Daniel Arap Moi told us at some point that the only ideology he knew was the Tumbo ideology. And you can see where the Tumbo ideology has taken us. And I think in recent times, and the media has not taken time to help to break this down. I'm privileged that you have invited me today, because people like myself are now shunned by the media because of how we try to be objective. Look, William Ruto has committed a certain sin. And that sin that he has committed has been to try to shift the center of conversation from the tribe to the class. But the struggles we have had have so far been tribal struggles. Tribe this against tribe that. And William Ruto has said, no. Let us reframe this. And I'm now speaking not as a Secretary General of a party. I'm now speaking as a scholar.
Okay.
Yeah? And he has said, no, it is a class struggle. It is the hustlers versus the dynasties.
The dynasties.
Yeah? And that has turned out very dangerously for him, particularly when he has framed that conversation in the presence of people he perceives to belong to
the dynasty.
Yes. And he has told them that because of certain dynamics, the child of a hustler who went to school without shoes, barefoot, I'm now able to sit at table with the son of the founding president, and that's an insult. Yeah. So they say we are going to show you dust.
We'll deal with you.
We'll put you in your place. Remind you where you came from.
So ideology gets lost. We are not allowed an ideological orientation, because if we should embrace the politics of ideological orientation and what this country requires.
When you speak of, sorry, Barrack, but when you say not allowed, when you say not allowed, you suggest that there's somebody then who is holding on to the controls. Because being allowed means that somebody is essentially giving you permission to do something or not. What then are the conditions that would allow for this to happen, or in this case, not?
And you know that the privileged classes are there everywhere, and they are monitoring these things. And actually, the privileged classes would prefer that the citizenry is zombified
and not aware of what is really happening.
Yes, everywhere in the world, starting with those who purport to be extremely democratic, United States, Australia, United Kingdom, everywhere, there's a zombification of the citizenry by those who own those countries. In fact, to the extent that they own people, they own your mind, and they do not allow certain dynamics to take root. And in this context here, it is not allowed. And some of them, however, the few wise ones, try to have around them classes of paid thinkers who tell them that you're pushing it beyond limits. Give it a bit of breathing space, otherwise it's going to explode.
Yeah.
And when they do not allow it to breathe,
It
it
explodes.
builds up to a point of explosion.
Yeah.
Right.
And when the explosive processes begin, they are self-propelling. There's nothing, no force
That can stop
in the
it.
universe that can stop them.
Wow.
Are we heading there?
Step by step, we are heading there. Remember, at the start of this conversation, I talked about negations and reversal. We make one good step forward, and then those who are the custodians of power take us 2-3 steps backward. And so we have found a certain space in which we play. You know, the steering wheel of your car, when it is not properly adjusted, you take it to the Juakali, like where I take my old jalopy, and he tells me, Barrack, he's steering, he's gonna play. He's gonna play. Yeah, there's a certain kind of radius in which it loosely plays. It's not exactly where it is supposed to be. It should be. And you cannot also quite say that it is defective, but it is actually defective. So it's gonna play.
Yeah.
So that place where it is playing, it stays there for a while. And because the vehicle is moving anyway, I do nothing about it. I know that it's gonna play. But I kind of carry on with it. But the scientific processes that we call friction are going on nonetheless.
Yeah.
And someday what you end up with is a steering wheel in your hands, and the steering wheel is disengaged from the vehicle.
From the vehicle.
And the rest, I leave to your imagination.
Wow.
Barrack Muluka, thank you very much for speaking to us today, and also for giving us that historical perspective of what we are seeing happening today, taking us back into that context, and also pointing to the future and what is likely to be happening.
Asanteni sana. It's always a joy and a privilege to talk to you people. I've always told you, you are a wonderful team, and it's always fantastic.
Asante.
Always a pleasure, Barrack.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.